And we shared with you details of a weekend meeting involving Sidney Powell, and others who were trying to encourage Donald Trump to possibly implement martial law in order to do a rerun of the election.
Also he could order within the swing states, if he wanted to, he could take military capabilities and he could place them in those states and basically rerun an election in each of those states. I mean, it's not unprecedented. I mean, these people out there talking about martial law, it's like it's something that we've never done. Martial law has been instituted 64 times.
When you've got almost nobody in the Republican Party willing to say, hey, this talk of martial law, this talk of overturning a democratic and free and fair election is absurd. You don't have a functioning party anymore. You have basically a cheerleading section for Donald Trump, and they are so terrified that, look, it was a great thought experiment, because I would love to see the hemming and hawing of everybody from Portman to Johnson to Rubio to Cruz to Hawley to Cotton to Sass, all of them having to try to answer that question. And they would do what they always do. They would suddenly have a meeting. They would never have heard of Twitter. They didn't know Donald who. They would do the same thing they always do, which is to sort of cower in the face of corrosive absurdity.
Among militaries, we do not take an oath to a king or a queen, a tyrant or a dictator. We do not take an oath to an individual. No, we do not take an oath to a country, a tribe, or a religion. We take an oath to the Constitution. And every soldier that is represented in this museum, every sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, each of us will protect and defend that document regardless of personal price.
Now for some perspective on what exactly is happening, I want to turn to retired U.S. Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. At one level, Colonel, again, this is in a story similar to many stories we've heard where the president has a crazy idea and people are trying to walk him away from it. In this case, though, it's hard to get your head around just how wildly dangerous and offensive it is. What is your reaction to what you have heard about this meeting and what the president's currently attempting to consider?
My first reaction, of course, is don't take counsel of your fears. We've just gone through one of the most incredible election sequences in our nation's history, certainly since World War II. More people voted by more methodologies in a pandemic environment, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to commend all those people out there in every state that work so hard to deliver a free and fair election. At the same time I say that, I have to say my fears are somewhat significant with a former lieutenant general in the United States Army saying what Flynn said with regard to martial law and going to the battleground states and essentially reconducting the elections. Were I the Secretary of Defense, I'd call him back to active duty, which is in the prerogative of the Secretary of Defense, and I'd court-martial him. At a minimum, I'd cite him for incitement to insurrection. This is not something that a military officer should do. You serve until you're roughly 85 years old. It's half pay. It's not necessarily retired pay. You can be called back at any time. I got my letter from Secretary Rumsfeld when I was Chief of Staff to Secretary Powell. I was called back to active duty. I was judged in a critical position and didn't have to do it. But that's the power of the military over this general, and he needs to be rebuked. He needs to be reprimanded, and he needs to be done so officially, and that would be the best way to do it. These other people like Bannon and Powell and so forth, they're sycophants who are seeking whatever they can gain from the magic aura of this man before it dissipates.
Point about General Flynn, just to circle back to that for a moment. I find the general's trajectory here really unnerving. I mean, this is someone who was, celebrated, had a fairly sterling record. People thought he was an incredible intelligence officer, and he was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency before he was essentially fired. And to watch someone who served and had this reputation and is known by a lot of people that work with him go on the trajectory he has, where he was essentially an unpaid agent of a foreign government, the Turkish government, which he did not disclose, and now, you know, idly talking about martial law, it's a very unnerving trajectory.
It is. In my view, he's a disgrace to his uniform. And he's one of those examples, and I knew several of them when I was in the military, some 30 years plus. He's one of those examples of a person who gets squirreled away in a special community, in this case, special ops and also intelligence. And he grows up to flag rank, and no one really applies any adult supervision. And I include in that General McChrystal in Afghanistan when he worked for General McChrystal. I blame General McChrystal for putting him in the position that he's in right now to a certain extent. But these people come along and they get to the position where they really have some authority, in this case, much beyond the 3 stars, national security advisor almost, and they then show their true colors. And I think that's what Flynn is doing. Otherwise, I've got to pronounce him a psychotic or worse.